Our next guest. Yep, you're gonna see the magic right in front of you. This is how this is all that happens. I queue up who's gonna come next, and then Lee does her thing, and Anna does their thing back there, getting our next guest ready. And that's going to be Michelle Mellion, is Senior Medical Director of Fulcrum Therapeutics. That's right, Fulcrum. We have another representative of Fulcrum working on Fulcrum's clinical trials and other great work. And we're going to talk to her today, right now. She is live on the Radiothon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Tim, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's great to have another representative of Fulcrum. It is a well-known name in the FSHD community. And we had Robert Gould on earlier, and we talked about Redux 4, and he knew some things. And I think he was, you know what he was really doing, Michelle? I think he was setting the table for you just a little bit, so that we had something to kind of talk about. But why don't we first start with kind of that base? I know you've done some work with the FSHD Society before, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what your role is at Fulcrum.
Yeah, so thank you, Tim. And again, thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this very important event. It's amazing what you guys are doing today, and we're just thrilled to be able to contribute. My name is Michelle Mellion. I am a Senior Medical Director at Fulcrum Therapeutics, and basically what I do is I try to understand the underlying causes of diseases and find treatments or test treatments to treat them, either symptomatically or hopefully find a cure. I'm also a neuromuscular disease neurologist, so I also do have a clinic and treat FSHD patients. I've been doing so for approximately 2 decades, and I'm very passionate about muscular dystrophy and muscular dystrophies, or finding treatments for muscular dystrophies in general, but especially passionate about the project I'm currently working on at Fulcrum Therapeutics.
All right, now you just did the teaser. I mean, to have the passion in your voice to say that's something that you're excited about, and then to leave us hanging there, you have to get, that's a softball. So, what is that project that you're so excited about, and how much can you share with us about it?
Yeah, so first of all, I have to say that I'm extremely proud to be at Fulcrum Therapeutics. This group really has the ability to take on hard problems and is not afraid to tackle hard problems. And much like the FSHD community, we're not afraid to stand up to FSHD and to hopefully find an effective treatment for the disease. As you said, Robert talked about Redux 4. This is the phase 2 clinical trial that we started last year to evaluate the efficacy of losmapimod to reduce DUX4-driven gene expression. And it is a small molecule. It's oral. Patients are taking it twice a day, and we're looking forward to sharing what we learn about the efficacy of losmapimod to treat FSHD next year, and in the second quarter. So we're excited about that.
You've spoke, I'm sure, to a lot of the patients throughout the process of this DUX4 trial in the phase 2. What are some of the insights maybe that you've gained from those conversations, or from speaking with the patients and getting that input from them?
Right. So I think that part of it, Tim, is not only about learning how losmapimod affects DUX4, but also how losmapimod helps patients in their everyday lives. And so we're working with patients, FSHD patients, to understand what's important to them and to evaluate what is important to them in our clinical trials. Even at the beginning, Tim, we actually took this current phase 2 protocol, and with the help of the FSHD Society, gave it to patients, had them read through it, and we wanted them to let us know, are we looking at things that are important to you? So some of these clinical outcome assessments that we are looking at is things that came out of our conversations with FSHD patients. Some of you may know we changed the timed up and go a little bit. We're looking at something that we are actually called the Fshd Tug, where we actually added on some additional components to the tug where we have patients actually starting from a lying down position and going to a sitting up position and then walking the 3 meters back and forth and then sitting down and lying back down again. And part of the reason why we did that is because patients told us, hey, you know what I really have trouble with these days is, you know, getting out of bed. And so we wanted to see if this is something that we are able to affect. Also, in many clinical trials for muscular dystrophy, it's very difficult to assess how people are using their arms. And so we teamed up with Jehan and his team at UCI to look at the reachable workspace and see if we can see if there's a difference or evaluate how people are using their upper extremities differently while they're on losmapimod. And also we are included several patient-reported outcome measures where patients can tell us directly on these questionnaires how things are going for them and can identify specific areas in which they're feeling better or where they may be feeling worse. And this is all very important. We couldn't do this without the patients telling us and teaming up with them to let us know what's important to them so that we can evaluate what's important to them.
Yeah, I mean, I was shaking my head there when you're talking about getting up out of bed, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like grabbing a hold of something and then trying to get yourself in that upright position. You're right. I mean, how else would you know how to gauge how the drug's working or not, or what, just gauge it in general, if you don't know what kind of movements that you want to kind of target? So it sounded like, yeah, communication was really key of what could you develop so you can gauge what is working and what isn't.
Exactly.
What was the exercise? What was the exercise prior to that you were kind of using to gauge? Was there one?
No, there wasn't. What we looked at was the timed up and go, which is a measure that is very well known in the clinical trial space and has been used across many clinical trials and was originally developed to assess patients for falling. But here what we did is we took something that was well known and we modified it so that we can evaluate patients with FSHD and address problems that are particular for them. And that's what's really important. And so not only is the ReDUX4 evaluating losmapimod's ability to decrease DUX4 in the muscle biopsies that we're taking, and we can talk about that in a moment, but also we're looking to see how it's affecting function and how people are functioning with it every day. And even though we know reducing DUX4 is important, it's also important to know that we are actually affecting people in their everyday lives and we're affecting the way that they are functioning.
Talk about that part of it. You mentioned the biopsy.
Yes. Yes, so the biopsy was part of the ReDUX4 clinical trial where we took biopsies before patients were treated with losmapimod and after they were treated with losmapimod. And we really appreciate people doing this. It's not easy to have a muscle biopsy. You may or may not know that, Tim. I mean,
firsthand. Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like a turkey. You know, I remember asking the doctor, make sure you get a good slice, doc. You know, like eyeing it up, like, and like, geez, this is creepy.
Yeah. Yep. And you're awake for the whole thing, and you know, it's. I tell you, you know, it's not an easy procedure, but you know, it is a doable procedure, and people do tolerate it pretty well. And we appreciate everybody, all the people, the FSHD patients who volunteered for us to take a piece of their muscle and to look at it. And basically what we did is we looked at these muscles before treatment and we looked at them after treatment, and we looked at DUX4 gene expression. And I think Lucianne Ronco was on earlier, and she probably told you that it's kind of difficult to look at DUX4 in particular, and so we have to actually take a look at the DUX4 signature. And earlier this year, you probably heard about our interim analysis where we looked at approximately 29 subjects. We took an earlier look because we had to modify the trial a little bit because of COVID, but wanted to see how things were going. And we had some very encouraging evidence which showed that in those muscle biopsies where there are high levels of DUX4 gene expression, that losmapimod actually decreases this signature, that DUX4 signature, which was very it was very important for us to see that result.
Right.
It was encouraging. I'm sorry, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. I know. And I was like searching with you. I was like, I got to give her the word.
I could see you were trying to
I gotta
help me
give her the
out
word.
there.
Like, oh, I don't know what the word is.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that, Tim.
yeah. I don't want to discourage people from doing the biopsy. I always get the
Mhm.
cringe face, all this stuff, but I
Yes,
always end and say it's always worth it. It's worth it. You're doing it not just for you, so it's just so it's uncomfortable. I mean,
yes,
walking up downstairs is uncomfortable, so it's like, oh well, it's just another thing, And this has a more uh, purposeful,
yes.
meaning to the discomfort. So by all means, don't let my ridiculous, weak male behavior. I
I
think
have
colds are horrible.
for the women out there, it certainly is less
That's
less
right.
painful than childbirth.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that because that's exactly where I was going with it. I'm just a wimpy dude. It was totally worth it. So, what can people, or what do you want patients, I guess, to understand about the trial process? And I guess I'm alluding to the fact that I'm sure you get this pressure feeling from patients, like, why do things take so long? Why do
Right.
things take so long? So, from your vantage point, what would you tell the patients about that? Why it takes so long, or this is the process and this is why.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I think that it's hard to it's hard to have patience,
Yes.
with research because everybody wants to know the answer as soon as we possibly can, and we're really working hard at Fulcrum to deliver this answer as soon as we possibly can to the FSHD community. And part of it is really, first of all, making sure that your drug is safe and well tolerated. And luckily for us, losmapimod actually has been tested in other indications, and we have a very large safety database, over 3,500 people, with up to 3,600 people, including our clinical trials, have been exposed to losmapimod, and we have a very good safety and tolerability profile. But you want to make sure that your drug is safe. And then the other reason why it could take a long time is because in many muscular dystrophies, as in FSHD, the way that these diseases progress is some of them progress very slowly. And so we have to be able to evaluate the effect on that slow change. I know that there are others that even the process in which FSHD progresses, in some people, I know that I said that it can progress slowly, but in others it can progress more quickly. And on average, it can take time to actually see that change in your effect on that change over time in patients' function. So I think that it's important for us to be able to evaluate the function, evaluate our endpoints. And for this reason, not only is Fulcrum looking at these clinical outcome assessments, which can sometimes take a while to change, but we are also looking at MRI. So in addition to the biopsies, as well as the clinical outcome assessments, everybody in Redux 4 had an MRI before treatment and also had an MRI after treatment. And we're looking to see how the muscles changed, but we're looking to see not only how the muscles changed, not only usually people will just scan the lower extremities, but we developed a protocol in partnership with AMRA to look at all of the muscles in your body. So we are getting a whole body MRI, if you will, and we're getting a whole body view of what all the muscles look like in FSHD patients that are in the Redux 4 clinical trial, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that was I had my pen over full body MRI, and then you bring it up. I was like, that's where we're going next, and then boom,
Yeah.
Michelle hits it right away, because I knew that you were working with that as well. And
Yes.
so you're doing, I think it's all encompassing, isn't it? I mean, you're doing what physically a person's needing to do to function through a day. So you're measuring that, the
Yep.
measurable of the muscle biopsy, and then to boot, you're doing a MRI as well. Did you feel like there's any stone you've not unturned to make sure things are progressing?
Yeah, well, I think that we're trying with Redux 4 to learn as much as we possibly can. And I think that, you know, between the molecular endpoint, looking at DUX4, looking at the clinical outcome assessments to understand the function, we believe that the MRI might be able to give us an idea at an earlier time point as to how muscle changes or changes in muscle health could potentially affect function. And so, so we're looking at those muscle health parameters in the MRI to understand that and to hopefully tell us earlier if we're having an effect on the disease process, but not by only looking at one little piece from one muscle, but by looking at basically all of your muscles. And so, so it's very exciting right now to be able to have that holistic view, if you will, not only from a functional standpoint, but also from a muscle health standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a patient, I appreciate that because you're seeing it from all different angles. I think I got most excited about the functionality side of it. You know, that's what I deal with or have to cope with. And it's changes. It's a challenge. It appears for a lot of the researchers. You find the same challenge because it affects people so differently.
Yes, yeah, and that's one of the challenges in FSHD is that it is a very heterogeneous disease, and some people progresses faster and other people it progresses slower, and there's even differences within families. So it's even hard to tell what that clinical progression is going to be. And even when you look in the muscles that are affected, even within the families are different. And
Right.
so it is challenging, but being able to have that time point before treatment and that time point on treatment and have that person sort of serve as their own control, you can see what types of differences there could be. And by looking at these, at the muscle health, having this whole view of the muscles in the body can be helpful in us understanding the potential impact of treatments, not only those mapimod, but other treatments that may come in the future.
Yeah, I suppose so. That's, are you kind of speaking then about, you know, information sharing a little bit? I mean, from other trials or things that are going on.
Yeah, and so I think that, you know, this is where the FSHD Society is so important, and that they help to set up these collaborations between industry as well as between pharmaceutical companies. It's very important to have that link through the FSHD Society so that everybody can learn together, if you will, and it's gonna, everybody can contribute to the knowledge. I think FSHD is relatively new to the clinical research space, and I have to say, Tim, the community, being that this is the first or one of the first clinical trials that FSHD patients have participated in, or global, I should say, clinical trial that FSHD patients have participated in. It's been incredible to see how people have really remained committed to the clinical trial, even in the face of COVID. You know, it's unbelievable, the commitment from this community and the tenacity of this community. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not surprised because, you know, my patients in my clinic, you know, all of them continue to go about their daily lives and continue to, as you do, Tim, work and are very tenacious and very passionate about FSHD and about finding a cure and working to help others in the community. So you know, it's been a humbling experience to see how everybody in Redux 4 really contributed and worked so hard, even through the COVID crisis, and continue to work so hard. Unfortunately, we're in another wave to contribute to the clinical trial. So it's unbelievable.
I know, and we've said this a couple of times throughout this little radiothon about, you know, leaving 2020 in the rear view. So then it leads to the question of, what are you excited for with your work at Fulcrum for 2021?
Right. So I think that for 2021, what we're really excited about is that in Q2, we'll be sharing the results of the Redux 4 clinical trial with the community and sharing our learnings with the community, and then hopefully preparing for other clinical trials in the near future. And that's very exciting. And I think that as we continue to develop these new technologies, these new biomarkers, and continue to be engaged with the FSHD Society, I think that we will certainly move the needle, hopefully toward a new treatment for FSHD.
Now, as we were chatting, some FSHD Society Southern California, as it's known as on Facebook here, chimed in a little question, I think kind of relating back to when we were talking about MRI. What they ask, what happens if a patient can't have an MRI?
Right. So for the Redux 4 clinical trial, the MRI was required in order to be enrolled in this study, but not all clinical trials will necessarily require that you have an MRI in order to be enrolled in the study, and future studies may not necessarily require that. And so it really depends on the development path for the treatments, but all treatments may not necessarily require MRI. But for Redux 4, we did require it.
Okay. And now I'll ask this one more on behalf of another viewer. This was earlier when they asked a question, and unfortunately that guest, we were done with that segment, and then the question came after. But with your background, I think, at least I hope, that this is something you can help this person with and answer it. The question is it very common for a patient with FSHD to also suffer from EDS hypermobility?
Oh, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. You know, to be honest with you, Tim, I'm not sure if they're related. It's possible. It's something that I would have to look into, but I don't know if I don't know if there's some link between Ehlers-Danlos and FSHD off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you answer it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but unfortunately, you know, just because you have FSHD does not necessarily mean you can't have other medical issues.
Right.
So it may be true and unrelated, but I can't answer for sure.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you tackling that one. But with your background, you said neurology as well. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
Go back to that question. I think Michelle might be able to help her out with this one. So stay tuned, answer, or look into it a little bit. But I'm kind of with you on that. That just because we have FSHD, you're right. You know, it doesn't mean you're immune to everything else. You got to kind of wage a couple battles at one time. But that's just how it works. I mean, that's just part of life. Look at 2020 for the love of Pete. So. Well, thanks, Michelle. I appreciate you coming on the show today on the radiothon here. This was amazing information you've given us, and we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Tim, and stay safe and be well, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. We really appreciate it. Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Special thanks there to Michelle Mellion and working with Fulcrum. More Fulcrum information. Sounds like the Redux 4 trial is going well.